everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. My name is Sebastian Fonseca, and today I'm going to be recapping all of the Week 2 NFL action around the league. To start, Miami traveled to Baltimore to play the Ravens on Sunday, and it was a really wild finish to say the least. On the opening kickoff, we saw Duvernay take it to the house from 103 yards out, and I really thought this was kind of setting the tone for the Ravens really asserting dominance over the Dolphins to start off the game. The Dolphins were able to tie up the game at 7 apiece thanks to Jalen Waddle. I mean, he had a really good day at the office. I saw him put up a 2-touchdown performance, including 171 receiving yards on 11 catches, and that's really good quality play. I had him in a couple of fantasy leagues and really paid dividends for me. But in the rest of the first half, Lamar really took command of it. He had a 79-yard touchdown scamper from the right end and just noticed that they didn't have any safeties playing deep, so he took advantage of that and just raced past several defenders, including Xavier Howard, who's an all-pro corner to say the least, but even he couldn't catch up with Lamar, and Lamar took it to the house. And they went into halftime up 21. I really thought that the route was on because Baltimore is really good at finishing off opponents. But in the second half, I mean, they came back, the Dolphins. They got another touchdown thanks to Mike Gesicki in the back of the end zone. We saw a really awkward, gritty performance from him. I mean, that's his best of a dad gritty, as you could say, but I mean, hell of a catch though. I mean, he outstretched his arms basically almost up to the crossbar pretty much. Got some light in the Dolphins, I mean, just to keep him within arm's reach. But then right back, we saw the Ravens score another touchdown, and they took a 21-point lead into the fourth. But in the fourth quarter, this is when Miami really took charge. They came up with 21 unanswered points. Miami was really able to get back into the game thanks to a couple deep bombs to Tyreek Hill. This was really his best performance as a Dolphin so far. I mean, he was able to utilize that deep ball from Tua, and that chemistry really seems to be going on pretty strong. Tua, he finished with the stat line of over 400 yards, 6 touchdown passes, and I think this is definitely his best game as a pro. And I feel like this offense may be only scratching the surface. I mean, they definitely look dead in the water in the first half, but if they can catch fire like this, I mean, they're going to be a really big ask for a lot of teams to try and guard. I mean, you have Waddle, who can line up anywhere, Tyreek Hill, who's the deep ball threat, Gesicki manning the center field action with the tight end spot, Chase Edmonds out of the backfield, they have Raheem Mostert. The list goes on and on about the bevy of weapons that Miami has, and on defense, I mean, they're solid. Really were able to give the Ravens problems in that fourth quarter. The Ravens were able to break the tie thanks to a Justin Tucker field goal to take a brief 3-point lead. I kind of disagree with the play calling though. They had a manageable third down, and instead they tried to go the end zone route, where I would probably try to just at least run a play, run a screen pass, milk the clock, and that way you can get it down to the 2-minute warning, and that took off at least 22 seconds off the clock. But instead, they left the Miami Dolphins with 2 minutes, 23 seconds and a couple timeouts. That's an age-long time frame in 2-minute offense, so that's plenty of time to go down the field and either tie or take the lead, and that's exactly what Miami did. They were able to maximize the time, and they scored thanks to a touchdown to Jalen Waddle with 14 seconds left, and that was it. The Ravens blew that big lead, and now they're going into week 3 at 1-1. Kind of a disappointing start. They could have easily been 2-0 and really separate themselves from teams like the Steelers, the Browns, and even the defending division champs, the Cincinnati Bengals, who are actually 0-2 to start off their season. But looking at Miami, they're definitely going to be a big threat so far, as long as they maintain their health. I think that Tua is just only going to get better with these weapons on the outside, and Miami is going to be a real big threat this season. And moving on to Washington, traveling to Detroit to play the Lions. Washington's coming off a comeback win over the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, and then they're trying to build off of that momentum. And the Lions, who kind of had a late rally against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, they're trying to build off of that momentum, and it seems like Detroit really has a lot of momentum offensively, to say the least. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was their kind of low-key gem from last year, really had a great performance with 9 catches for 116 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He ran all over the field. He was lined up in the slot, or he was running on deep routes. He ran the rub routes every which way of the route tree. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown do, and him and that chemistry with Jared Goff is really becoming a big problem for secondaries to guard. And I think he's going to be a big threat moving forward. He's going to be one of those top tier receivers that we'll be seeing. And this offense is only going to get more stacked once Jameson Williams returns to the lineup after his ACL recovery. Him lined up with Amon-Ra, and then they had TJ Hawkinson, and then not to mention DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams too. I mean, this offense is actually pretty stacked, and they've really built the offensive line as well, with last year's first round pick being Penei Sewell. I mean, they got him for a steal at the position that they had last year, and it's pretty exciting to see what Detroit be able to do. On the Washington side, Carson Wentz started off slow. Being an Eagles fan, I saw him make a lot of mistakes that he used to do, where lacked pocket presence and got off to a slow start. Detroit got off to a 22-0 lead, and thanks to most of it being some of Carson Wentz's mistakes. He missed some throws in the first half. He had a bad strip sack that led to a safety, and then the following safety allowed them to perform a free kick to Detroit, and Detroit got a pretty good return off of that, leading to another touchdown to take an early 12-0 lead. They continued to beat the brakes off of Washington, and Washington never really got too close other than just a 1 possession lead in the fourth quarter. And this is when Washington made some questionable decisions, in my opinion, when they had the chance to go down 8 points or even 7 points. They kept going for 2. And then eventually towards the end, unfortunately, due to these excessive 2-point conversion attempts, the kicker missed an extra point. And this is the reason why they lost by 9 points, which was a 2-possession game. If they'd maybe decided to go for maybe one fewer 2-point conversion and then settle for the extra point, this would be a 1-possession game. I mean, a far doable feat compared to getting an extra possession and trying to win the game that way. Next up, we have the Jets traveling to Cleveland to play the Browns, and the Browns really had advantages left and right. They have so much more talent than the Jets do, but the Jets played with a lot of heart. I mean, when the deficit was 2 touchdowns almost, thanks to Nick Chubb's 3rd touchdown of the day, they went up 30-17 with 1:55 left, and people want to say that Nick Chubb scoring on this play maybe was the wrong thing to do. They could have bled out the clock. I don't really think so, for reasons that, one, you want to score because you want to provide a large deficit, and then 2, there's a lot of things that have to go wrong in order for that lead to evaporate, which was, first, the defense had to give up a touchdown to cut the lead to 6. Then the special teams had to give up a onside kick recovery, which they did, and then the defense had to give up another touchdown. So that's 3 things that had to happen despite Nick Chubb scoring a touchdown. So we can blame Nick Chubb, but he did provide 3 touchdowns and a pretty good rushing output today. So I'm not going to really put this on Nick Chubb. It's more to do with the defense and the special teams of the Cleveland Browns. And kudos to the Jets. I mean, they never gave up. They played with heart, like I said, and Joe Flacco, who definitely has come out kind of strongly this season. He had a pretty decent performance against the Ravens, considering the circumstances, and now today he traveled to a former division rival back to his Baltimore days, and he really had a good output today. So I'm happy for Joe Flacco for getting another good performance towards the later stages of his career. Next, heading down to the Bayou, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the New Orleans Saints, and this has been a headache for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers as of late. Excluding the one postseason win back in 2020 where they defeated the New Orleans Saints in the divisional round, we've seen the Bucs really struggle against the New Orleans Saints defense. They've been shut out a couple of times, and last year they've been swept. The year before they've been swept, and then today this was their first regular season victory against the New Orleans Saints since Tom Brady has moved down to Tampa Bay. In the first half, though, we saw a lot of the same struggles. I mean, New Orleans really clamped down on the Tampa Bay offense. They only scored 3 points heading into the fourth quarter, and this frustrated Tom Brady. We saw a few highlights circulating on Twitter with Tom really yelling and showing frustration due to the lack of offensive output. But, I mean, it's credit to that coaching staff of New Orleans. I mean, they know how to play this team, they being division rivals and all. So they know really how to exploit it. I mean, clamping down on a Tom Brady-led offense is no easy feat, but they know that they're doing something right given their history. Midway through the second half, we saw tempers flare between Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore, and these are two big rivals as of late. We know that there's an established beef there, and this is only adding fuel to the fire. We saw Marshawn Lattimore kind of gesture towards Tom Brady in maybe a threatening manner, and to protect his quarterback, Mike Evans shoved him to the ground, and this ensued a sort of a skirmish or brawl, whatever you want to call it. Both players were ejected, and I think that's fair. It's just another event in the hard, long beef between these two players, but they still have another matchup later in Tampa Bay this season, so it'll be really exciting to see how these two get on the field in their next matchup. In the fourth quarter, Jameis Winston turned back into Tampa Bay's version of Jameis Winston, providing 3 interceptions, and these led to 17 Tampa Bay points. One of them was also a pick 6, so this was truly the difference in the ball game. I mean, it was close throughout. The defense did their job. It's just that the offense of New Orleans didn't really match the New Orleans defense's output. So when they were put in those short fields, of course, Tampa was able to take advantage, and they ended up winning 20-10. The next game I wanted to discuss was the Carolina Panthers heading to New York to play the New York Giants. This is Baker Mayfield's second start as the Carolina Panthers starting quarterback, and he's trying to redeem himself after a kind of a tough showing against his former team last week. Both teams really struggled out of the gate. We saw them in a little bit of a field goal battle going into halftime 6-6. In the beginning of the second half, we saw Baker Mayfield lead a really nice touchdown drive and finishing it off with a touchdown pass to DJ Moore in the end zone to take a brief 13-6 lead. But this is when the Giants offense was able to come back and even the score, tying it at 13 apiece. And then we saw more field goals and then better execution on the Giants side to pull off a 19-16 victory. Daniel Jones had a solid game, not a great game, but again, he won, and this is something enough to keep his job for the time being. I don't think he's done anything to jeopardize his starting job just yet, so for people thinking that he will be benched, they will have to probably wait a little bit longer. But kudos to Coach Dable. I mean, he's been doing something right and potentially changing the culture for a much maligned Giants franchise. The Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the New England Patriots on Sunday afternoon, and this is the first game without J.J. Watt for the foreseeable future as he suffered a pec injury last week. His presence was greatly missed as they didn't generate any sacks on Mac Jones, who was able to get the ball out to receivers like Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers, who also had a pretty solid game. Both Joe Judge and Matt Patricia have been alternating play calling duties, and this has led to some confusion in the wide receiving corps, particularly with Jacoby Myers, who voiced some concerns this week. Thankfully, they did have a pretty good offensive output with him having a solid game, and also receiver Nelson Aguilar going over 100 yards receiving. And they also was helped with some strong running play as well, and their defense really were able to get the stops when needed. So this is a step in the right direction for the Patriots, who really need to keep up pace with the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills if they want to make a postseason run this year. Moving on to Indianapolis facing Jacksonville. Jacksonville continues to be a house of nightmares for the Indianapolis Colts, as now this is their 8th consecutive loss in Jacksonville. And today they were completely shut down. Matt Ryan had a really bad day at the office with 3 interceptions, resulting in a shutout loss of 24-0. Trevor Lawrence looked pretty solid in his second start of the season, coming up with 2 touchdown passes. And this is now Jacksonville's ascent to the top of the division for the first time since their 2017 season. Transitioning to the late afternoon games, we saw Atlanta play the Rams, the defending champions, and they really made it tough on the Rams, coming up with a late rally in the end. The Rams were up by 3 touchdowns heading into the fourth quarter, and this is when the Atlanta offense really got clicking. Despite the lack of targets early on this season to Kyle Pitts, they were able to utilize rookie Drake London's red zone threat abilities, coming up with his first touchdown reception of his career. And they actually only lost by 6 points. They had a possession towards the end of the fourth quarter with a spectacular play by Jalen Ramsey, who intercepted Marcus Mariota pass in the end zone to really seal the game. I had to really give some respect to Atlanta, despite them coming up short in both their 2 games against superior opponents. They played really hard. It's just that they still have that lacking of finishing the game off and really being able to come back from deficits or hold on to leads. But this is truly a good start. I mean, they're getting their young core some good reps in play. I feel like Kyle Pitts should get more targets, especially in the red zone areas. I mean, he's just such a good talent. He can run so many routes, and he's very fast and a true matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. So there's got to be a way for Arthur Smith to really implement him into this offense. The Seahawks, coming off a surprising Week 1 win against the Denver Broncos, traveled to the Bay Area to play the San Francisco 49ers. And the biggest news of this game was unfortunately the loss of Trey Lance for the season. It seems that he's broken his ankle, and with that, I don't think he's going to be able to come back. And this means that this team is now going to be under Jimmy G's watch now. And he played pretty well. I mean, coming off the bench, he led them to a pretty thumping victory against the Seattle Seahawks. And this is now his team that has had the chemistry early on from his previous runs with the 49ers. And I feel like the locker room now feels more comfortable. They had some trouble bringing in Trey into the fold. I don't think he had all the backing and support. It's going to be interesting to see what Trey Lance can do moving forward in year 3. I mean, he's started off the bench in his rookie year, and then this year was lost due to injury, and he's only had now 4 starts, resulting in a 2-2 record. And they really have to make the most of this core. I mean, they just extended Deebo Samuel. They have George Kittle at tight end, Brandon Ayuk. I mean, there's a lot of talent offensively. They have a really good offensive line, some good talented running backs, and a really solid defense as well. But I just don't know what they're going to be able to do with this small sample size. I mean, Jimmy G is obviously going to get shipped out next year. And with the amount of draft capital and the essential mortgaging the future for Trey Lance, it's a very minimal return on investment. So short term, yes, the Niners are going to be fine, but long term, I'm really going to be concerned. Houston went to Denver in Russell Wilson's home debut for the Broncos. He struggled out of the gate, and I think that he's still having some issues figuring out the details in the Nathaniel Hackett offense. We saw Jerry Jeudy unfortunately leave with a shoulder injury, so Cortland Sutton was the focal point for the receiving corps, but he had a really good game. Went over well over 100 yards with 7 catches for 122 yards. And while Denver's offense is sloppy, this was still a win, and I think they can build on some things in the future. They do play the San Francisco 49ers next week on Sunday night, and that will be certainly a good game. And I think if whoever wins that game can see a lot with what their season output would be with that winner. The next 2 games were very wild, to say the least. We saw Dallas play the Cincinnati Bengals, the defending AFC champions, and they got off to a really strong start on the opening drive. Cooper Rush led a touchdown drive, and I was very impressed of how he orchestrated the offense. Didn't do too much, didn't make too many mistakes, probably got a little careless with a couple throws, but didn't make any devastating mistakes. On the other side, Cincinnati has some issues on the offensive line. On the other side of the ball, Cincinnati really struggled protecting their franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow. He suffered 6 sacks, and now this is the 4th or 5th consecutive game of where he's been sacked at least 3 times, and that has really had to change. Now the season is now 17 games, and he has to be upright to have a chance to utilize these very good weapons on the outside with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd. He just simply didn't have enough time, and we want to say that maybe Trayvon Diggs clamped down on Jamar Chase. It's probably because these are coverage sacks, so he didn't have enough time to find Jamar Chase. And every corner is going to benefit from a really good pass rush. And salute to Micah Parsons, who came up with another 2-sack performance, bringing his season total to already 4 sacks on the season. And he utilized some nice matchups, especially against his former teammate Lyle Collins, who reportedly gave him some advice last year when they were teammates, and I think that really came to bite him back in the butt. Cooper Rush was able to take the Dallas offense into field goal range, and they were able to finish the deal with a Maher field goal from 50 yards out to seal the win. And now they're 1-1 on the season. Now they get a couple softer divisional games with the Washington Commanders and the New York Giants, who I think are solid, and they're playing pretty well, but I don't think they're nearly as a threat as Dallas would be in the NFC East. But they have a chance to really improve before their schedule gets tough again. So they could be in pretty good shape if Dak can heal up and get back to them in a decent amount of time. And then the most chaotic late afternoon game was the Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raiders. The Vegas Raiders really got off to a good start. They were up 20-0 midway through the second quarter, and a late touchdown gave the Cardinals some life, but really Kyler Murray's offense was looking dead in the water. Kyler Murray really came alive in that second half, though. When they were down by as many as 16 points, he led 2 touchdown drives, including 2 two-point conversions, especially the one as time expired. Given that last ditch attempt, he rushed it into the end zone to get the touchdown, but the most important thing obviously is that 2-point conversion, and he was able to hang in by sometimes with his legs and found AJ Green in the back of the end zone to tie the ball game up. In overtime, we saw them drive down the field and get into fringe field goal range, but they were stopped on 4th and 1, giving the ball back to the Raiders. And this was the Raiders' first time touching the ball in over a half hour. They looked a little out of sorts, but they got a couple of nice passes out to Hunter Renfrow, who fumbled, but then an offensive play was able to recover it. But then 2 plays later, he unfortunately fumbled another pass, and this time Byron Murphy was able to scoop it and score it, and that's sealing the game for the Arizona Cardinals, completing a very wild comeback. And I haven't really seen a game end on a scoop and score in quite some time, but the Cardinals are now pretty much alive in this really chaotic division in the NFC West. The Rams are now 1-1, the Niners are 1-1, and the Cardinals are 1-1, and even the Seattle Seahawks are 1-1. So it seems fairly even to start off the gate. I would say that Seattle obviously would probably dip out later towards the season, but given the injury to Trey Lance, this certainly opens the door for the Arizona Cardinals, and they could maybe make a run at the wild card spot for sure. And to close the Sunday action, we saw Chicago play Green Bay. Chicago is coming off a pretty nice win in the rain against the San Francisco 49ers. Justin Fields looked pretty decent with managing the offense as best he could. And they got off to a pretty decent start. They started off the first quarter 7-3 thanks to a Justin Fields touchdown. But after that, it was pretty much all Green Bay. Their offense was able to wake up and fire on all cylinders. We saw Aaron Rodgers kind of slice and dice this Chicago Bear defense, as he's done for several occasions. And Aaron Jones made an appearance as well, tallying well over 150 total scrimmage yards. And if this is what the Green Bay Packers are, they're definitely a threat to be the top team in the NFC, but we need to see this consistency come out of them. They need to get some chemistry going in their receiving corps, but thankfully it is a long season, and they do have a relatively easy schedule. They won't be playing Minnesota for quite some time, so Green Bay looks better than they did in their first week, but like I said, we need to see more of a sample size before we can make any conclusions. To recap a Monday night doubleheader, we started off with Tennessee traveling to Buffalo to play the Bills. Now both teams are definitely going in opposite directions. The Tennessee Titans started off with a loss to the New York Giants in a stunning upset, and meanwhile the Buffalo Bills started off the season dismantling the LA Rams, the defending champions. Now, the opening quarter, it was kind of even. Both teams scored and got into the end zone, making it 7-7. But after that, it was pretty much over from there as the Bills closed the game on a 34-0 run. This included a pick six from Matt Milano, 3 touchdowns between Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, and another Josh Allen touchdown pass as well, making his total 4 on the day. Now, after that second Ryan Tannehill interception, that kind of ended his night, and that led to Malik Willis getting his season debut, getting some key reps in mop-up duty. He didn't play that great, but, it was mop-up duty. He was going against the second-string defense that the Bills didn't have all his starters in as well, but I'm sure he'll get an opportunity if Ryan Tannehill continues to struggle this season. And if the season doesn't go the way that the Tennessee Titans envision, I think it's better to get him out on the field sooner than later and maybe build on it for next year as well. And now the Bills just look unstoppable. I mean, they came up with another 2 sacks today. Their secondary really got after it. And their offense, just looks unstoppable. Stephon Diggs put up a hat trick of touchdowns today. Then Josh Allen just is resuming his MVP-like pace. If I were to say an MVP after 2 weeks, I'd give it to Josh Allen, not because of just his play, but also just that in the dominant fashion that he's played against pretty good quality of opponents, at least on paper. And if this trend continues, they're just going to be really tough to beat. But they do get a nice test next week against the Miami Dolphins. Both teams are undefeated. So we're going to see what each team is really made of and see how this measuring stick evaluates both teams in week 3. Going to the other Monday night game, Minnesota traveled to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. And this game was pretty much dominated by Philadelphia from start to finish, showing great signs of complementary football. On the game's opening drive, we saw Jalen Hurts cap it off for an opening touchdown drive for a 7-0 lead with him using his legs, and forcing a couple key 3-and-outs on the Minnesota offense after they had such a stellar performance against a pretty good Packer defense, showed some confidence in defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon after giving up 35 points to the Detroit Lions last week. So they definitely made some adjustments, holding the Vikings offense to only 7 points, and they got after Kirk Cousins, pressuring him left and right, coming up with 2 sacks, numerous hurries, and forcing pretty errant throws. In the first half, he really struggled to get any kind of rhythm, coming off just a really nice performance against the Packers, but only mustered up 1 pretty good touchdown drive. But other than that, in the first half, it was totally dominated by Philadelphia. And I was really excited to see them dial up this play call where Jalen got a chance to really showcase the deep ball, and Quez Watkins got featured on it. I think he's a really nice burner receiver, can really stretch out the defense and then let other pieces go into work beneath him. With A.J. Brown, you have Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. There's only so many defenders that you can allocate, and one of them is going to be open, that's for sure. And towards the end of the first half, Jalen Hurts had this really nice touchdown run. He was initially just scrambling out on a bootleg on the right and getting first down yardage, but he kept looking downfield and noticed there was openings. Following a nice lead block from Dallas Goedert, he tightrope the sideline and skirted back in towards the inbounds, and then powered through numerous Viking defenders from 5 yards away to finish off a 26-yard touchdown run. And I was really impressed. I haven't really seen this kind of play from him. I've seen Gallups, I've seen him work really well in the red zone, but a long touchdown run like this was the longest of his career, so I was really impressed by that. Definitely going back to some of his old footage from his college days, he actually can squat 600 pounds, so he always had that leg power, but this was really a time to showcase it underneath all the primetime lights. In the second half, the Eagles defense pitched a shutout. We saw them allow no points, forcing 3 second-half interceptions, all in the red zone off of Kirk Cousins, who never seemed to get settled into this game. 2 interceptions were at the hands of Darius Slay, who had a really nice night. He shadowed Justin Jefferson throughout the night, only allowing 1 catch, had 4 pass breakups and 2 interceptions, and an overall passer rating of 0.0, which kind of shows that it's been a really nice night from a cornerback's perspective. He traveled with Justin Jefferson as well, in fighting the matchup, so got some really key third down stops too in the first half. And Avonte Maddox also chipped in, coming in from the slot corner position. He didn't let Kirk Cousins lofted the ball over him to the receiver he was guarding and came up with a nice play. Took a hard hit too, for sure. But kudos to Avonte Maddox for holding onto the ball and completing that defensive stop. The pass rush was a lot better in this game from the Eagles' perspective. They didn't get too much heat on Jared Goff in their season opener. This time they were pretty much relentless. They bothered Kirk Cousins left and right, hit him, forced him into altered passes, rush passes, and they totaled 2 sacks. One was a strip sack from Fletcher Cox, and at the end of the game, with the game kind of in hand, this was just one last gas to get some offense going for the Minnesota Vikings. Josh Sweat came up with a nice sack to clearly end the night, sealing the dominant win. So they had 2 sacks on the night, which I was pretty impressed with. The Eagles have created some distance now with a 2-0 start, and if they continue to show this nice play, they can really take advantage of Dak's absence and create some distance between them and the Dallas Cowboys. And transitioning to my week 2 best offensive performance, I'm pretty sure that it's clear that has to be Tua. He came up with 6 touchdown passes, 469 yards passing. I'm not too happy about the 2 interceptions, but the overall offensive output coming back from a 21-point fourth quarter deficit, I think that showcases what he can really do given the adequate help and weapons on the outside. So he's definitely my week 2 offensive performance of the week. For the best defensive performance, I mean, there was just so many great performances we saw this week. I'm going to give it a shared title tonight with Micah Parsons of the Dallas Cowboys. He came up with 5 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, extending his league total to 4 on the season, and I think he's off to another stellar start. And then I have to give it to my man, Big Play Slay. I think he's been great to start off this season, a couple pass breakups against Detroit. He had so many near interceptions tonight against the Minnesota Vikings, but he did come up with 2 in the red zone when it really matters, and guarded Justin Jefferson really well. Like I said, really clamped down on him, and I think he's off to another stellar shot himself. So both players definitely seem like they're Pro Bowl caliber, even All-Pro after 2 weeks. So they're going to be sharing this award for week 2. Teams that impressed me in week 2, I'm going to give it to Miami for sure. They showed some guts. They came back. They showed some ability to overcome adversity. I mean, a 21-point deficit at multiple frames in the game is not an easy feat to overcome, yet they did so to move to 2-0. A new team, a rookie head coach, a not so proven starter, and some new pieces integrated into this offense, yet they're off to a really good start. So very impressed with them to start. It's a great win against some quality opponent in the Baltimore Ravens. Another team that impressed me, I'm going to give some flowers to the Detroit Lions. After nearly pulling off a stunning comeback against the Philadelphia Eagles, they thumped the Washington Commanders on Sunday. They showed complimentary football. The pass rush really got at it. Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks on the day, and Jared Goff had a really stellar game, passing it to a variety of receivers, but led by Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's definitely proving to be a really talented receiver, and they got him for a steal in the 4th round last year, and he's only going to continue to get better. So very happy with Detroit and what they've been doing over there. The Dallas Cowboys, despite them losing Dak Prescott and with the defending AFC champions coming into their home stadium, their defense led the way for sure, helping out their backup quarterback in Cooper Rush. Led by Micah Parsons, he had 2 sacks, and then they also had Armstrong chip in with 2 on himself. And there was good coverage too. I mean, when there's good pass rush, there's not a lot of time for any good quarterback, just like Joe Burrow, to have time to get the ball out to his talented receivers. And Trayvon Diggs had a nice game guarding Jamar Chase. So very impressed with Dallas despite some adversity. They managed to start off the season at 500. And we'll see what the future unfolds for Dallas, but for right now, I mean, they're in good shape so far. And the other 2 teams that impressed me were the Monday night winners, the Buffalo Bills and the Philadelphia Eagles. Both teams dominated their opponents from start to finish. Both played really nice complementary football. And they're both led by their quarterbacks, both young, relatively new, arguably very good dual threat quarterbacks, and both going to be up there in the MVP conversation this season. And the teams that really concern me definitely has to be the Cincinnati Bengals. 2 weeks now, Joe Burrow has suffered a plethora of sacks, not getting the adequate time to really survey the field, and now his internal clock has been rushing. He's rushing throws, not really setting his feet when there is time, and I don't think he trusts that line now after taking a beating in 2 games now. So I'm not super happy with them, and now thankfully all the teams in the AFC North did lose, so they didn't literally lose that much ground with them starting 0-2. But they're gonna really need to pick up the pace and catch up with the teams like the Ravens and the Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. Another team that concerned me despite winning on Sunday was the Denver Broncos. They got off to such a slow start, and Nathaniel Hackett doesn't seem to be making the most out of Russell Wilson's skill set. Russell Wilson himself has really been struggling out of the gate, and the offense just kind of looks lethargic, and now the injury to Jerry Jeudy is not really a help in a really talented wide receiving corps. So concerns arise there for sure, but I'm not so sure about what their season unfolds. Another team that also concerned me was another AFC West team in the Vegas Raiders, starting off 0-2 in a division with the Chiefs, the talented Chargers, the Denver Broncos. Now is almost making the season over before it started. Very rare that 0-2 teams come back to make the playoffs, and there's just a lot of ground to meet up with, especially in their conference being so talented too. And they just have such a tough schedule. They have to play the Chiefs twice, they have to play the Chargers another time, and they still have to play the Broncos another time. And them blowing a 16-point lead, and the amount of steps that they needed to do, when you think about a 16-point lead, that's 2 touchdowns, 2 2-point conversions, and losing the game on a fumble recovery taken to the house in your home stadium is not a good way to start off your season. They're way too talented to have lost that game and also start off 0-2, and their schedule, like I said, is not going to be as forgiving either. So they're dug into a really big hole. I'm not sure they can dig themselves out of it. And another team that definitely concerned me were the Indianapolis Colts. It just seems like every time they go to Jacksonville, they failed to produce. Now, they've been shut out 3 times since 2017, lost 8 straight matchups in Jacksonville, and despite them having different quarterbacks in tow, I would be concerned if they don't really pan out this year, that maybe it's a question of bringing back Frank Wright for another season. They've tried every which way with a plethora of different quarterbacks, and I know that Matt Ryan has to play better, but they're definitely a concerning team after 2 weeks. And after this week, after falling flat in Philadelphia, I have to have some concerns. The way that their offense got totally shut down by Philadelphia's defense. Justin Jefferson was really a non-factor, and Kirk Cousins, you could see, was definitely bothered by a lot of looks that the Eagles defense ran on him. So it's a question of if their offense can travel, whether their play can travel as well. They have a leg up on the Packers right now thanks to that tiebreaker that they got in week 1, but they're going to have to really earn my trust back. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot more TikTok and Instagram content, and stay tuned for that. So until next time, take care.